Hello. Today we're going to talk about the tree of life. So, all of life on Earth and how do we organize it? So, here we are looking at the three domains of life. And so, here at the very bottom of our domain of life, or our three domains of life, we have the very first living organism at the very bottom. And as time has passed, the line goes up, and here this represents this spot where the lines sort of bisect shows Luca, the last universal common ancestor, our last universal common ancestor. So this is an ancestor to everything that's living on Earth. And so the DNA of everything on Earth, every life form on Earth, is an ancestor of this Luca, of this last universal common ancestor. And so from this Luca came bacteria, or the three domains of life: bacteria, Archaea, and Eukarya. And this is where we exist right over here, animals. But let's not jump ahead. Let's talk about how we organize life. We organize life by putting them into categories with shared characteristics. So, for example, we say everything that produces milk and has mammary glands and has hair, well, we call those organisms mammals. So we put them in a category called mammals. And organisms that are cold-blooded and covered in scales, those are reptiles. So they have shared characteristics or common characteristics, and we can put them into categories based on those shared characteristics. And so what we're going to look at is just a very big picture of shared characteristics. So there's a lot of life on Earth, and we have broken it down into three basic categories. Bacteria, also known as prokaryotes, or the domain Prokarya. Archaea is our second domain Archaea, and domain Eukarya. And this is where we exist again, right here in domain Eukarya. So let's look at what are the shared characteristics in each of these categories, in each of these domains. Let's first start over here in domain bacteria. These are our, let's say, not very complex life. These are single-celled organisms, so domain Prokarya, but we also call it domain bacteria. They're kind of interchangeable. But they're made of prokaryotic cells, so prokaryotes. And so prokaryotes are single-celled. They're not complex, and they lack a nucleus. So if we look at this cell here, we can see that there is DNA. There is definitely DNA, but it's not separated in a compartment called a nucleus. Sometimes people get mixed up and they think, oh, bacteria don't have a nucleus, so therefore they don't have DNA. But that's a misconception that I don't want you to fall into. It does have DNA, but it's in a nucleoid region, not in a nucleus. So these are not complex, and they don't contain a nucleus. And so there are many different types of bacteria. There are many different kingdoms of bacteria, but we're not going to get that deep. We just know that there's a domain bacteria, and we know that they're very small, and that they're not very complex, and that they're single-celled. So let's move now into our next domain, Archaea. Archaea are once again not very complex. They're single-celled. They're made of prokaryotic cells, and so they don't contain a nucleus. What's different about these organisms is that they're oftentimes extremophiles. They're really cool. They exist in parts of the world where nothing else can live. So usually methane is very toxic to living things, but there is an archaea called a methanophile that can live in methane-rich environments. There's many different types of methanophiles, but there are the archaeas can live in these extreme environments, so like halophiles, meaning that they love salt areas or environments with salt, and so oftentimes very salty environments is once again toxic to other living things. So they are pretty cool in the fact that they can live in these extreme environments. So we are 2/3 of the way there. Let's look at Eukarya now. Eukarya are organisms that are eukaryotes, meaning that they are composed of eukaryotic cells. So here is our generic eukaryotic cell. We can see that there's a nucleus, there's lots of membrane-bound organelles, which we didn't see in the prokaryote. There's just a lot more going on. The cells in domain Eukarya are a lot more complex. And so domain Eukarya has both single-celled and multicellular organisms. But every single cell in a multicellular organism has a nucleus. And so there's a lot more complexity here in this domain. If we break this domain down a little bit further, we can see here's our tree of life again. Here's our domain bacteria. Here's our domain Archaea, and here's domain Eukarya. There are 4 kingdoms that we're going to study in domain Eukarya. There are other kingdoms, but we're just going to look as far as the 4 here. So there is kingdom Animalia. That's where we exist. We're animals, and we are in domain Eukarya. So we are composed of eukaryotic cells, but we share characteristics with other animals that puts us into this this kingdom, this category. We also have kingdom Plantae. So right here, kingdom Plantae. So those are our plants. Those are organisms that photosynthesize and use the sun to create energy. Animals eat their food, so that's how we different. So animals are going to, they're heterotrophs, they're going to eat their food, whereas plants are autotrophs, they're going to produce their own food from the sun. Fungi are also a kingdom in domain Eukarya, and they're pretty cool. They're actually more closely related to animals than they are to plants, which is counterintuitive because they actually consume their food as well. Fungi eat their food. And then kingdom Protista. That's a weird word. I'm sure you've never heard that before. And these are just the single-celled eukaryotes. So all of these, so kingdom Animalia, kingdom Plantae, kingdom Fungi, those are all multicellular organisms. If an organism is composed of eukaryotic cells or composed of a eukaryotic cell and is single-celled, then we put it into this Protista category. And so here we have our domain Eukarya and our 4 kingdoms. And that is how we organize life into the 3 domains. And so we can call those the 3 domains of life, and we can call it the tree of life. But all of life on Earth is united by Luca, L-U-C-A, the last universal common ancestor, which is right there. So I hope this helps, and I hope you have a great day.